Let the darkness of the world escape your eyes. Give it all away, that's what you like. Says when no one you gotta choose, baby. You gotta choose, you gotta choose, you gotta choose, baby. You gotta choose, we gotta choose, don't wanna talk about it, don't wanna deep dive. Give me a night cloud. Don't wanna talk about it, don't wanna deep dive. Give me a night cloud. You'll be like this, you make me love to when just in the world and you'll be like this. Cause I'm a big kid. Cause I'm a big kid. 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 Is it worth it? Let me work it. I'm only laying down, flip it and reverse it. It's your primitive when yet. It's your primitive when yet. If you got a big, let me search it and find out how hard I gotta work it. It's your primitive when yet. It's your primitive when yet. I like to get some yes, and I can show ya. I could have hurt my everyone doing. Hope everyone's doing good. Hope everyone's feeling it. It's so weird when it's just staring at a screen, but yeah, I hope you're vibing. Go downtown and eat it like a boat. My hips, big hips, so chai. See my butts and my lips don't chai. Lost a few pounds in my waist, go fly. This the kind of beat that go ba-ta-ta. Ba-ta-ta-ta, ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. Sex me so good I say blah, blah, blah. Work it, I need a glass of water. Boy, you It's good to know you. Work, it's work, 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 it's work, work, it's work, work, it's work, it's work, it's work, it's work, it's work, I'll make it hot as Las Vegas. Listen up close while I take it backwards. Oh, bad bitch, it's kind of serious. I'm not impossible, but I can give you what you want.
That's me. I'll let the convo get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Chimba. Hello, everybody. My name is Yola, and I'm from Chalkback, and I run Cat Calls of Chi-Town, which is our Cat Calls Off account in Chicago.
Hi, my name is Tanisha, and I also work at Cat Calls of Chi-Town with Yola.
So today, Tanisha and I will be your MCs. Yeah.
We'd love for everyone to introduce themselves in the comment box below. And next up is Ayushi from Gender at Work.
Hi, thank you, Tanisha. My name is Ayushi, and before I start, we'd quickly like to take a poll to see how everyone's feeling today. The poll's gonna run for, let's say, 30 seconds. And while you take the poll, I'd like to introduce myself and my organization. I'm the communications manager at Gender at Work. For those of you who are new, we're a transnational network, and we basically work in every region of the world. We work essentially on building cultures of equality and inclusion, about transforming organizations so that they become more inclusive workspaces, more humane, so to speak. To that end, we work with a range of organizations and activists who are on this journey and are trying to find answers on how to be more equal. So today's conversation, and largely our association with feminist collectives like Chalkback and Cat Calls, are a way for us to work and associate with amazing young movements like yours and try to have conversations around more intersectional and equitable workplaces, and see how can we support these organizations to become really more equitable. And now the polls run for 1 minute, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop it. Okay, you'll all be able to see the results of the poll, and while you do that, back to Yola and Tanisha.
Thank you, Ayushi. Up next, we have Sophie from Chalkback.
Hey everyone, how's it going? I'm so excited to see you all who are panelists, and I'm so excited that so many of you are tuning in and watching. I'm Sophie. I created Cat Calls of NYC, which is just one of many cat calls of accounts that make up Chalkback. So for those of you who don't know, Chalkback is a youth-led movement against street harassment. And what we do is we use Instagram to collect people's stories via direct message of harassment they faced on the street, and then we write those things down on the sidewalk in colorful chalk to raise awareness, share stories, and start dialogue to amplify voices, all sorts of good stuff. And we are so excited to partner with Gender at Work for this event to focus on Pride, LGBTQIA+ activism. It's really a great space that we're creating. I'm so excited to hear everyone speak. I want to say two things. The first is it's actually disabilities activists. It's Disability Pride Month this month, which I think is maybe less known than regular Pride Month. So in fact, that is right now. And also I wanted to put into context that Black Lives Matter protests are happening around the world, in the US and in New York as we speak. And none of these issues are separate. They're actually really intimately connected. So as we talk about Pride and as we talk about feminist collectives and this activism, none of these issues are separate. And we really need to focus on how to build intersectional feminist collectives like Chalk Back, like Gender at Work. And I'm so excited to hear from you all.
So today Gender at Work and Chalk Back organized this feminist collective, Pride Feminist Collective, which is an intersectional space and a safe space, we hope, for feminists and for people who identify as queer or are allies. And this is just in the spirit of Chalk Back. This is a creative and participatory space. So we encourage Googling, doodling, drawing, note-taking, asking questions, commenting, and creative expression throughout the event. And if you want to post it online on Instagram, you're welcome to tag both Gender at Work and Chalk Back or Catcalls of NYC and share it, and we'd love to repost it. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, just to echo Tanisha, the purpose of this space is to highlight experiences which often, like I would say, like often are very neglected within feminist spaces. So the purpose of today is for us to learn and to share. Again, like Tanisha said, we do encourage doodling, but we also encourage Googling because I think it's always great to stay informed. So yeah, if you do doodle or write or want to do something super creative, and would like to post it, of course, if you don't want to, that's all right. But if you would like to post it, make sure to tag Gender at Work and Chalk Back. Yeah. Okay. Up next, we have Yosna from Gender at Work. Josna is a project manager at Gender at Work in India. They are an actor, activist, feminist, and a writer based in Delhi.
Thank you for that warm introduction. So I would like to introduce the session that today we're talking about feminist collectivization, and just to briefly share what I understand with feminist collectivization is really the aspect of bringing the voices within feminism and across different understandings of feminism. What I really identify with is the intersectional feminism, which really deliberate on multiple identities and the multiple vulnerabilities of individuals who are spread across the spectrum of race, caste, gender, sexuality, religion, and how do we bring and organize and collectivize voices of dissent and critical voices to bring this big feminist collectives in India and across the world together. So I would now request panelists. We have 3 panelists today, and I'm so happy to be welcoming them. The first panelist is Ashley, then we have Lamia, and we have Michael. So I would just request the panelists to take a moment to introduce themselves, and then we take the session forward. So I would request Ashley.
Hi, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. My name is Ashley Burnett, and I am the founder of Feminist, which is an intersectional Caribbean feminist organization. This year, I was accepted to the 2020 class of Women Deliver Young Leaders. And so in light of everything happening at Women Deliver, the cohort that I'm with, we've been trying our best to give our demands, give our feedback to try to, contribute to some sort of reform. So that has been that. And I was recently appointed the chair of the Trinidad and Tobago National Chapter for the Caribbean Women in Leadership. And so the work, it's very interconnected and it connects. So yeah, that's that.
Thank you, Ashley. Very, very excited to have you on the panel. Now we move on to Lamia. Could you please introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Lamia. I personally work as a therapist and I'm associated with the Queer Muslim Project as a co-member. The Queer Muslim Project, our work lies on the intersection of faith and gender sexuality. And yeah, feminist principles are one of the core tenets of our organization. So definitely very excited to be here. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing everyone.
Thank you, Lamia. We're very happy to have you on board. Now I would request Michael, our third panelist, to please introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Chiwunda, and I'm an artist, poet, writer. I'm also a volunteer for an LGBT organization in Zimbabwe, and I work primarily in the mental health department. And basically what we do is, of course, we work with therapists, we work with psychologists, but more importantly, we work around trying to empower young people within the LGBT in regards of opportunities that they actually have. And also just trying to give a holistic approach when you're trying to understand people and giving people opportunities within my community.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank
Very
you.
happy to have you. I would actually like to begin the session with you and would love for you to share your experiences about how do you imagine the queering and the feminist workspaces to look like? And if you can share any anecdote or example from your life that made you think about the intersectional and inclusion in the workspaces.
Okay, so first I'll start off with how do I imagine queering and feminist workplaces to look like. So when I was going through this question, the first thing that I thought about was physical spaces, right? So in my country, unfortunately, they don't have, and we don't have really progressive laws that allow expression for people within the LGBT. We don't have progressive laws that are actually practical that help to champion feminism. So I would really love like organizations to have more platforms for both you know spaces. But again, like Sophie said, I don't think these are separate. I don't feel like they're separate movements. In as much as they have their own identity, but at the same time, you know, you would find a specific person who's also queer and a feminist. So I would love these spaces and organizations to have actual physical things that you could see, you know, like flags, like to, you know, incorporate stuff like dates. You know, Sophie talked about today being a special day for, you know, disability. And I feel like those are the things that become reminders for people within the spaces who have been marginalized or in minority groups. So again, I feel like physically there should be reminders. And the second thing that I thought about, because again, I work in mental health, I would appreciate if there are more things to do with the mental, being a safe space for people within these spaces, people within the LGBT, feminists as well. I understand that you can never, because again, within the LGBT, within feminism, it's so broad, it's so dynamic from community to community, from person to person. So one thing that I don't see in my community specifically, because it's a traditional and homogeneous community, is people do not ask questions. People don't ask positive questions. So for example, again, we're talking about Googling. People do not ask you, they don't mind about stuff like pronouns. And I feel like in a way, you know, workspaces, organizations try to have people work. But at the same time, for you to be able to work, you need to feel safe. You need to feel comfortable because you're spending at least a third of your time. In my country, you're spending at least a third of your time in workplaces. So you need to feel like you're being accepted. You need to feel like you're associating, that you're incorporated within the spaces. And this is where the mental part comes in, being able to have actual conversations. that empower people who are queer, that empower people feminists. Not saying that they're better off, but if I look at my history, again, I'm speaking of my own experience in my country. If I look at our history, there hasn't been much conversation. The legislation, even in households, because it all starts at home. So I feel like if we're able to have those within organizations, people can take things that they learn within these organizations back home and are able to then inspire, and we have very beautiful. I see the beauty in a lot of people. So we have like beautiful communities, beautiful homes, and hopefully we have a progressive community, progressive African community as well. So it all starts with the physical spaces and also physical spaces and communication. What was your second question again?
Just asked you this question, Michael, but I will come back to you perhaps, because there's one question I would like to address to all the panelists. But thank you for sharing your experience and talking about bringing more representation and inclusion within the organizations. And I think that is really important, and that is one of the challenges that we are facing in all our work, because it's really about making workspaces more intersectional and more inclusive, to be able to open up the workspaces for everybody across the spectrum of race, gender, sexuality, and in context of India and South Asia, also caste. That brings me to the second question, which I would like to address to Ashley, that often LGBTQIA+ movements, are now that we see seemingly are being taken up by young people, and there is a sort of leadership that is emerging amongst young people, use of social media, all of that. But then what are the challenges? What are some of the challenges that you feel that inhibits or prohibits movements, especially feminist movements and LGBTQI movements, with your experience? I mean, it makes it difficult to bring some of these intersections together. So if you could share a little bit about your experience, really looking forward to hear. Yeah.
Yes. I was thinking about this question. Actually, this has been one of the main reasons that I started Feminist. This year was a huge eye-opener for me with feminist spaces within Trinidad and Tobago. How exclusionary they are, how not accepting they are of the LGBT community, of people who are queer. And so it's something that I found to be super problematic, because to me, being an intersectional feminist means that you must be inclusive, right? You must understand the different types of identities that exist within the feminist movement. And I see a lot of older feminists super exclusionary. And that in itself has contributed to making the growth of certain communities and spaces stunted, because there isn't anyone you can go to ask for advice on how they can actually help integrate the work. And so it's like two groups against each other. You have the young feminists who believe intersectionality is the way to go. And then there are the older feminists who are like, nope, this is how it is. Woman, you must be cisgender, and that is how it is. And so that has been the large problem to advance for me. And I think, like, looking at the Caribbean, there are so many feminist groups, intersectional feminist groups, who do a lot of work with queer folks, and they try to, integrate that kind of work there. But then you have like the government, right, who has laws that don't protect these people, and so it now falls back on these groups to ensure that they can keep people safe. And it's like a tug of war, like recently in Trinidad, since 1999, that was the last time our Domestic Violence Act was amended. It's 2020 now, and they're in the process of amending it. And there is like extremely exclusionary language in there. It does not include queer folks. Like a same-sex couple cannot go to cannot get any kind of protection, really. And you see groups advocating against it, but still, you can't. If the laws don't protect you, it becomes like a tug of war for the teams. And so that is a major setback, I believe.
Thank you, Ashley, for sharing that. I feel like, yes, you have brought in really important again, a thread and thought to this in terms of, there's a lot of gap in terms of leadership and also understanding, because I guess feminist movement history, if we see in the West and also in India, has largely been, led by the privileged women, the white women, and in case of India, upper caste women. So there has been this sort of the agenda setting, which we feel has been transphobic, has been queerphobic, has been, there's been sort of phobia around disadvantaged communities as well. And then it kind of brings me to the question to Lamia. Then, looking at your experience of as a mental health practitioner, and also your work with Queer Muslim Project, which is now really a global platform that brings in diverse voices in India and across different countries of, people who identify themselves as Muslims and queer. What do you feel, how can organizations become more queer friendly and can allow the diversity and representations to come in? And this could be as specific or as broad as you think. Yeah, would love to hear your thoughts.
Right. I think one of the things that when organizations do try to be more, queer, inclusive, or more diverse or anything like that, I think one thing to take into account would be, the all-encompassing nature of cis heteronormativity. It's not just about outright stances of homophobia, transphobia, queerphobia most of the time. Heteronormativity, cis heteronormativity is so pervasive that I think to actually overhaul and question the structures that make up an organization itself would be a good place to start. Like, for example, even if you try and just include queer people in your conversations or even in your, managerial positions or whatnot, but if the structure itself, in fact, I was reading something about cis hetero masculinity, and that the culture in most organizations is very masculine, but also like heterosexual, cis heterosexual masculine, and that's who, and it is, and that power is yielded through language and understandings and gap and pay and all of that. So it's not just, it cannot be just a superficial effort of just employing or just including more. Of course, that's a good step because most organizations don't even get there. But I think just questioning and critically examining the structures and practices of the organization and affirming, non-normative ideas and actually allowing space for that and holding space for these ideas, I think would be a good place to start. Yeah, I think that's how I think one way to go about making places or organizations more queer, affirmative, and not just superficially queer inclusive would look like.
Yeah, thank you, Lamia. I think what you're also kind of bringing is also shared by Ashley and Michael, is something similar, that we just don't want organizations to use queerness and use feminism as just some sort of ideologies because it's politically correct, but we do want to build systems that recognize some of these multiple vulnerabilities. And no to tokenism. I guess it begins with tokenism, and for me personally, it's fine, because how many times we even get to be the token, so I guess we begin with the token, or quote unquote, but it has to progress beyond that and really changing the systems and working systems around it. So I guess the last question, I would address it to all the three panelists, and please feel free to share and just share your thoughts with us about really your experience of organizing feminist voices and work, and how does that can take account of the multiple vulnerabilities and identities of people. So when we talk about feminist spaces or queer spaces, how can we allow the organizing, the feminist organizing, to go beyond just the realm of activism, but really come into the spaces of work and personal, intimate spaces. So any thoughts on that from Ashley, Lamia, and Michael? I would love to hear.
That is a super great question. And it's, for me, I think to come into that, firstly, you must acknowledge that whatever your previous beliefs were, there is something wrong with it, or at least it's deserving of unlearning and then relearning certain things. And so, I mean, here in Trinidad and Tobago, like I related to that no tokenism thing so much, because oftentimes I've been like the token queer to sort of give advice as to how you should plan an intersectional space, which is ridiculous, because you can also Google and, you know, just figure out how to actually be inclusionary. So I think the first step definitely is to unlearn, and then don't rely on your own beliefs, because a lot of people think that the only thing that LGBTQIA plus people want is to be able to have the rights to get married, when there are so many like intricate things, like to be able to show up in a space and not feel judged, right? There's so many things, so many tiers of it. And so I think it is having yourself open to learning, to critique, and to also talk about it, rely on other people, on other groups, you know, on the public, to have these conversations, because I don't think it's as clear cut. I don't think you can just wake up and there's a manual how to go about it. I think it's definitely knowing that is something wrong, because if you don't think anything is wrong, you're gonna continue operating from a space of this sort of entitlement and privilege, and think, okay, my feminist space, you know, this bougie kind of lunch and that we have is all that people want, you know? So definitely unlearning, and then having yourself open to actually create these spaces through listening and learning better.
Any thoughts from Lamia and Michael?
Should I go?
Yes, please go ahead.
Well, reiterating a little bit on what Ashley was talking about, you know, intersectionality and understanding that people live with multiple marginalization, and, you know, in feminist spaces, when you're talking about only gender, then you are deliberately excluding so many other marginalizations, especially like with our work in the Queer Muslim Project. We're already living with multiple marginalization, you know, in a country like India, where we are constantly bombarded by Islamophobia at all times, and also obviously homophobic, transphobic, queerphobic things from all communities, you know, including our own Muslim community. So this is something that we have to deal with constantly. And I think, and what intersectional feminism would look like would not be just to be inclusive, but also, you know, like, for example, say you're making sure that your workplaces include like inclusive and diverse of, say, different sexualities and gender, but they're not accessible by wheelchair. So that's not really an inclusive workplace, you know? So you have to take into account different axes of marginalizations that people live with, you know, and you cannot focus on just one axis of oppression, as most or many feminist organizations have often done, or, you know, often ignored, sort of this idea, more or less building on what people have already said, that, you know, let me get my rights first, and that, like, we can get to you later, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that's what I think we need to focus on it.
Michael?
Yeah, so I was listening to those opinions and I felt like they were really, really, really inspiring and really great. And I guess one thing that I really wanted to address was first, in terms of, so I do believe in equality. I think it's a great thing, but the challenge that I feel with equality is, like, I think everybody knows this, is you are raising people to the same platform, but not necessarily considering the degree of the platform. So in my community or in my context, I would really want there to be equitable platforms. So how that might then look like is, the one thing that I looked at was, I was having this conversation yesterday, is in regards to education. So when you look at how, particularly in universities, so when people go into universities in my country, they sort of have kind of equal rights in terms of, the feminist aspect. But, you know, forgive me to say this, but just for clarity, I will say in regards to now the LGBT, particularly, let's say, trans women and, you know, women, you know, in quotes, I feel like it's very marginalized, again, because you would look at, people talked about how legislature and how governments take, you know, advantage of some of these spaces because, you know, they're trying to be politically correct. So what you see, particularly in my community, is, like I said, the laws are really silent, but at the same time, because there's this huge wave of funding around queer communities globally, right? They end up having to agree because it's a form and a source of funding for them. So at the end of the day, they are creating equal opportunities on paper, but it's not equitable because at the end of the day, you see, again, I work in an NGO, you'll find that a huge chunk of all this money goes to the government in terms of taxes and whatever. And the people that I'm serving at the end of the day do not get to benefit. And you can't really call them out because there's no law that supports. And you can't really have these conversations to the legislature. You can't really have these conversations in schools and universities, like I said, because yes, they are giving opportunities to women, but there's no conversation around trans women. They are teaching about feminism, but it's not really applicable or it's not really applied by them because, again, there is no law that gets to support. And one thing that I would really love to add that most people might not be aware of is Zimbabwe is really, you know, because this is going to be on the internet, I really have to choose my words wisely. But in terms of like enforcement by the police force, right? You can't really be, as a queer person, and as a feminist, again, you can't really go to the cops and have these conversations because they enforce the law, but the law is silent and people are not being educated around that. So I would really love for feminism, for queer spaces to be on the ground. We don't get to see all these politicians. We don't get to see all these lecturers on the ground, even when it comes to like the health system. Again, I told you that I work in mental health, so I work with a whole lot of psychologists, and I refer a lot, you know, a couple of people to clinics and whatever. But these people don't come out into the field. I refer clients to these institutions, but these institutions never really come out and go to see what's really happening on the ground and have like a, you know, an awareness of what's going on. So for accountability, you know, when we talk about accountability, it's all about being able to actually know. And one thing that was said that I really thought was an amazing point was unlearning. I think I was actually unlearning, you know, being very open to new ideas and relearning. And because this is a workspace, one thing that I've learned about workspaces is you are there to obviously work, but because it's an open play field, it's an open playground, you shouldn't come with your opinions or with your lifestyle and impose. It's all about having that conversation, learning new people, and then trying to bridge the gaps in terms of, you know, trying to create these workplaces to be as comfortable as possible. That's what I think about accountability.
Thank you, Michael. I guess it just brings us to the end of the session, which I so feel that it should continue because I've really enjoyed listening to all the three panelists. And I think just to kind of summarize a little bit, the whole session deliberated on the need for intersectional inclusive spaces and to kind of bring this, of course, there are separate movements, but then there is a need to find convergence and bring together voices that are diverse, bring in representation within the organizations. And the last bit that Michael just ended their session was of talking about police and police brutality. I think it's a very, very important aspect that we're not really talking much about it. And I think it's only made me realize that there is a need for transnational solidarity. There is a need for transnational, transdisciplinary disciplines solidarity and coming together to be able to solve some of these really complex problems. So I would like to thank all the three panelists, Lamia, Ashley, and Michael. Thank you for joining us and sharing your insights, your experiences with us. I have really learned a great deal just in half an hour. Do we have time for questions?
Yeah, 5 minutes maybe. Not
Okay.
now. There are 2 questions. I think you should.
Okay. Okay. Where does it begin? I guess. So I guess there's a question. I'm just trying to figure out where questions begin here. I think there's a question which asks, what are the challenges you face at your workplaces? That's the first question. So if any of our panelists would like to respond to that. It doesn't address to a particular panelist, so please feel free to share.
Let me just say, so in our organization, like the Queer Muslim Project, even though, like I mentioned, we do live in multiple marginalization, but there are also so many other things that, you know, we are privileged on. Like, for example, I am an English speaking, I am a mental health practitioner, you know. So I think while taking decisions just to make sure that it is representative of actually queer Muslims and queer Muslims who probably don't come from the privileges that I do. So I think that's something that we do struggle with, to especially to include more trans voices, you know, like, of course, in our core team, we do have trans people, but like repeatedly, I think this is something to check over and over again, that we are not even like at the axis of at the multiple marginalization that we do live in, at the same time also acknowledging the privileges that we do come from, and making sure that, you know, we take this we keep us or check on ourselves or our decisions at every single step, you know, and it's not just that overall just because we're queer Muslims we are representative of all queer Muslims. So I think in our organization what does help us making decisions is to constantly check in with our own privileges and make sure that we do have voices that maybe we are not able to represent them well, you know. So I think that's one of the way in our organization we make decisions.
Thank you, Lamia. There's one more question I would take, and again would address to all the three panelists, so please respond. The question is, and I think it's an important question, what are your recommended next steps, call to action to feminist organizations right now? Perhaps Ashley or Michael would like to respond.
I think the next immediate step should be to revisit the working plan that they've been using for the past however amount of time that they've been in existence, and now calling on someone who they would have seen, because I mean here, and I'm sure around the world, there are so many activists and advisors and people who are very, very versed in creating an intersectional space. And so throw away the working plan that you were working with before, and realize how much it's rooted in the feminism of the West and white feminism and all of that. And then forging a way forward, even if it's a small way, because nothing is going to happen overnight. And you're not going to become, you know, the ideal intersectional feminist organization just by one article reading. So I think it's a work in progress. Have workshops, get a consultant, and forge the way forward.
Thank you, Ashley. That was really useful. Michael, would you like to briefly add if you have any thoughts?
Sorry, what was the question? I was trying to look for the question again.
The question is that what would you recommend as next steps, or you know, like recommendations to the feminist organizations right now, call to action basically.
Right. So, you know, I've been really impressed with some of the feminist organizations, or at least the feminist individuals, feminists within my country, the ones that I do know. And one thing that I would love, again, I think we addressed it within the conversation, is trying to see that, for them to see that it's not exclusive, right? It's not a, you can be a feminist and you can be queer or you can be hetero. There are so many facets that come to a person, and allowing yourself as an organization or as a leader within an organization to see that also allows you to have a very broad insight or a very detailed insight of what feminism would mean for your organization. Because again, when you do form an organization, you have your own ideals, you have your own opinions. But someone might then like your organization, or at least 60% or 70% of what your organization represents. But you're still supposed to incorporate that 30%. So allowing people to continuously have a platform, in as much as you might think you're progressive, in some way you might have, a way that's still traditional or aggressive, or, you have specific points where you're not really allowing people to express themselves. So I feel like the call to action right now would be, continuously having dialogue. I love how conversations, like I am a very Twitter person, so I love how conversations happen on Twitter, and I love to see organizations having those back and forth on Twitter with feminist groups and organizations and actual, individuals, because it's also a way of gathering information from the people that you're saying you represent. That'll be my take on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for your questions, and for all the panelists to really be patient and just sharing their thoughts. So I would now leave it on to Tanisha and Yola.
Yeah, thank you, Jyotsna, Michael, Ashley, and Lamia. Now I think Ariel is going to recite one of her beautiful poems for us. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Peace, everybody. Thanks again for having me on. Really enjoyed that panel. So I have a poem to share with you all this morning, and I hope that it resonates. I hope that we all find the strength that we need to hold ourselves at this point in the history of the world, and for all the changes that we're making. There is a hunch in my neck, 2.5 generations old, that Saturday morning cartoons and Sesame Street put there, that my father's collection of kung fu movies put there, that my grandfather's religion of boxing and wrestling that he used to call wrestling put there, that low self-esteem put there, that kneeling down on the cold tile church floor put there, that being a yes woman all the time put there, that my aim to please put there, to pivot the needs of other people put there, that my empty of self until there was no me left to keep me put there, a curve down my neck that I used to bow to my Instagram app, to my laptop screen, to my library books, whatever makes me feel like I belong in this world. It forms a caving in of my chest so that my heart sinks further away from the world. A cave in of my chest so that I do not have to believe I am worthy of my breath all the time. A cave in of my chest so that my shoulders are always fixed into a shrug of I don't know, because to know is to become responsible for knowing, and my body wants to bend itself away from blame, and so I cave in and hide inside of it. It is safer that way. To doubt my spine into a slouch makes me collapsible, a compliant fixture in any relationship, able to be folded and stored away at neck, is to allow my brain access to my heart, to lift my neck, is to allow its swivel to be yes or no, or whatever my heart wants to decide. To lift my neck is to say it with my chest. It is to say things I forgot worthy of saying. To pull my shoulders back is to fix the fallen bridge of my collarbone. It is to mend my way back to love, to pull my shoulders back. It's to give of my heart without fear of dismissal. It is to mend my way back to love, to pull my shoulders back. It's to say it with my chest. It is finding back my song deep in the cave of me and have it echo itself back out into the world. To lengthen my spine is to say that I have one, that I have my own power to walk in and not the shadow of another. To straighten my spine is to rid myself of the depression, the sinkhole of myself. It is realignment with all that is good and God about me. It is making my womb the center of gravity. And this is everything but straightforward. It is self-correcting until habit forms. It is learning how to have my own back first. It is supporting myself first so that I could support others. A core satisfied with its own density to straighten my spine. It's to mount the center pole of my home, the thing that the rest of this body crowds around to make this temple one worth their worship. My spine, the last prayer holding up this church of bones. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Ariel. That was really, really beautiful. So up next, we will be hearing from some young activists. First up, we have Sol. Unfortunately, Sol cannot turn on their video at the moment, but Sol is from Catcalls of UCMJ.
Hi everyone, my name is Sol. I go by they, them pronouns, and I'm with Chalkback. I run Catcalls of Union County, New Jersey, and it's currently being co-run by Chloe, who unfortunately couldn't make it, but I am really happy and excited to be here. The poem that was just read was so powerful. That was amazing. I just wanted to say that. And I feel like in terms of queerness, it's really important to recognize the intersectionality between feminist movements and queerness, because I feel like there really cannot be one or the other. You cannot stand for women if you do not stand for all women, or people of varying identities, such as those who identify as non-binary, such as I do. So before I joined this movement, I identified with she, her pronouns, but I realized that I still have a place in this movement as a feminist, even while not identifying as female. So it's extremely important to always remain intersectional. And I think that the conversation that was happening earlier about the call to action on how to make feminist organizations more intersectional is that I think it's really important to create space, but there is so much space in organizations that are already taken up that I feel like many people should step down to give up their space to people who are queer, people who have disabilities, or any other form of identity that's considered a minority. So, because nobody knows their identity, knows how to advocate for one's identity as well as a person who identifies that way. So although like white activists can be like incredible allies, I feel like it's important for them to use their platforms to uplift other voices. Thank you.
Thank you, Sol. That was really insightful. And next we have Amanda.
There's some problem with Amanda's mic. Maybe we could go to the next person while we figure that out.
For sure. Ray, would you like to speak? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ray. I'm the videographer and editor for Catcalls NYC. And when speaking on creating a more inclusive space to all people, I wanted to speak on disability because not only is it Pride Month and Not only is it Pride Month for the disabled community, but we are living in a time of eugenics when things like quarantine loaf is trendy and the Black Lives Matter movement is huge and taking over social media, but Black disabled voices are not being amplified at this time, which is particularly important when usually it is the disabled creators who are reliant on social media and having to be those social media creators who have to stay home. I am a video creator and editor, but I am semi-ambulatory, so I can only shoot for so long and I can only take on so many projects. So the best way that I can say that organizations like Chalkback that make me feel like as a disabled creator, my time is worthy there and I actually want to stick around is first, I definitely look at organizations on their pages and I will definitely notice if the word disabled is not used. And I will definitely notice if chronically ill is used instead. Disabled is not a dirty word, and that is where that is coming from. But also if people are able to give anything that they can to disabled creators to make what their needs are more accessible. So that's asking what people's needs are, not their illnesses or their symptoms or how these things manifest, but what their needs actually are. And this is not just you as a creator, but us as friends and family, having family members who are sick and potentially chronically ill and not identifying as disabled because not just saying I'm here to help, but hey, I know that laundry is harder for you. I know that meal prep is hard for you. I'm gonna come over for 2 hours. What is a good night to do that? Disabled people don't always have that ability to ask for help. And also, it's hard to advocate all the time. It's very tiring because you have to advocate in every single part of your life. We all know what it means to be somebody who makes sacrifices in order to make everyone else feel comfortable around us as we explore queerness more in depth. So anyway, the queer community and most marginalized communities have large amounts of disabled people, and thank you for making this an inclusive space as well. That's all.
Thank you so much, Ray. We definitely needed to hear that. So up next,
I'm here to say that at any time.
Thank you. Up next, before we move to the next person, we just noticed that Chloe joined. So maybe Chloe wants to speak.
Yes. Hi, my name is Chloe. I work with Soul on Cat Calls at UCNJ, and basically, for me personally, really what a pride means to me, especially right now, is that as an activist, I feel that what I need to do is amplify queer voices by getting involved in these panels and active discussions, talking about BIPOC and their relevance within the LGBTQIA plus P plus community, because I feel like they also play an integral role. A lot of times we are often pushed away and we aren't recognized. I think it's important, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement on the rise again. So that's what feels very important. And chalking, what I'm trying to do is see how we can try chalking out more important quotes and messages about raising awareness about pride.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Chloe. Up next, we have Raquel.
Hey, so I'm a designer from Mexico, and I really felt what we said earlier about, older activists saying how it's supposed to be. And in Mexico, we have a lot of hate towards the trans community, especially from older women activists who try to gatekeep what feminism is and try to divide, like, especially there's a group of lesbian feminists who are devoted exclusively to dividing the trans community from them. So I just think it's important and it's hopeful that young activists push the intersectional message across all platforms. So we all know it's not, your voice will not represent all voices. Your experience is unique, but it also only represents your experience, and we all need different voices to represent all the fight we need to get across, especially when living in the city is very different from living in rural areas, going to school, and people who aren't able to access school areas. We can't just depend on 5 voices representing what it means to be queer and feminist in all of one country.
Thank you, Raquel. That was really insightful. I think we all need to hear more about amplifying other people's voices if we don't share their experiences. And that can really help make feminist and queer spaces more inclusive. And next we have Amanda. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I don't know, good morning, good evening, because here I'm in Uganda. It's 6 p.m. So my name is Amanda, and I live in Uganda. I'm currently part of the Beijing Youth Task Force, and we're working on this generation equality process. But unfortunately, due to the coronavirus, the Equality Forum in Mexico and in Paris was canceled. So what Pride means to me, and something that the UN Women is taking over, is something on intersectionality and diversity in relation to LGBTIQ rights. Because of late, you could see UN Women was frontlining issues to do mainly with women and girls, but they were not bringing in the concept of diversity and intersectionality. Spotlight Initiative was bringing out things on gender-based violence, but trans people or other gender diverse groups still face violence. And Pride to me is an opportunity as a way to bring out that we exist, which the UN Women is doing. And with my recent interview is something that I felt coming out. And I want to thank this call that decided to bring out this moment. And I'm glad that it's bringing in the perspective of gender. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Amanda. Up next, we have Thisbe.
Hi, I'm Thisbe. I'm a chalker for Catcalls of NYC, and I'm going to read a poem that I wrote a few weeks ago. I live in New York, and I feel like the forefront of all of the activism that we do as LGBTQ plus people or by POC has been directing our energies toward the Black Lives Matter movement. And I feel like that's the most pressing issue right now that we can focus on. And obviously, we've been talking about intersectionality, and that totally applies. The Black Lives Matter movement applies to LGBTQ rights, and LGBTQ rights applies to the Black Lives Matter movement. So I wrote this poem at a time when I wasn't really hearing how non-Black POC could, support the Black Lives Matter movement, so I wrote this poem as a response to that. Being Asian in a black-white binary during the revolution, a how-to. Learn how white systems seek to divide people of color. That is how they conquer. The model minority myth made to give Asians a taste of white privilege simultaneously teaches anti-blackness. Please understand, yes, Harvard wants to rate USC for personality, but white conservatives destroy affirmative action for themselves, not for you. They are racist too. Stay updated. Follow Black activists on Instagram, not just Sean King. Continue amplifying, reposting. When wondering if advice addressed to white people applies to you, it does. Self-reflect regardless of the anti-Asian racism you experience. Your dad accepts Nai as racist. You always ignored her anti-Black comments. We're taught to respect your elders. Try to change her mind. It matters. Call her on the phone, confirm she hasn't caught corona, that she still wins Mahjong daily, then talk about the protests. When she says protesters are stupid for looting, should use the justice system, explain, the majority of protesters are peaceful. Skip topic of violent white supremacists for now. The law fails and has for 400 years failed Black people. When she says Black people are lazy, leech off of social services, you try not to cry. Show her that stereotypes are false, e.g. model minority stanza 2. Explain all the ways white society, aka supremacy, strives to keep Black people in poverty. Show Nai how you empathize with Black people, the similarities in POC's pain, enduring racism in this corrupt country, attempting to survive in the land of the free. After you get off the phone, cry if it feels good. Find more places to donate, sign, email, protest. Call Nai, your Asian friends, family, again tomorrow. Try again tomorrow. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Thisbe. That was beautiful. That was absolutely amazing. Up next, we have Chimba.
Sorry, I was busy trying to type in the chat. That was amazing. And then, yeah, wasn't expecting to get caught in. Yeah, so I've been reflecting on everything that's been said. I'll share a bit on my work, which is with Duale. We are a collective based here in Malawi. We work with African women and non-binary folk, and we provide spaces of healing, economic empowerment, and just mostly a safe space for people to, I guess, refine yourself in a sense. We started in 2012, mostly because child marriage was still legal then, and Malawi was just in a very desperate situation. And so we've been working in the policy space, and we marched and were able to get the government to criminalize child marriage in 2017 and officially in 2018. And so since then, we've just continued as a space, and some of the things that we're looking at right now is ways that we can safely but also strategically fight for LGBTQ rights here in Malawi, where it's currently illegal, as in some of the countries that are here. So yeah, it's been a journey for us, but I think when we think about the way we approach our activism and just hearing from everyone here, I think something that as organizers, as people who are concerned about the well-being of everyone in our global space, is we need to look at the systems that are in place. And I think a lot of people mentioned tokenism here. So we need to look at the systems of heterosexuality, the systems of ableism, the systems of capitalism, all these systems, systems of cism, and all of that is what, in a sense, I think a lot of the spaces that are being created that are inclusive are still working within those systems. And so I guess the big push for us is how can we completely unlearn and completely restart in a way, and just completely, I want to burn down everything. So completely take down all of those systems, because none of it is working, and everything is just built in this capitalistic, greedy way that's just seeking to root and root. And so, yeah, as much as we push for rights right now, I think the main goal for us at Tuwale, and I'm sure for a lot of you, is how can we just completely dismantle everything and sort of recreate this space. Yeah, that's what I'd like to share.
Thank you so much. That was really encouraging and motivating for everyone, I think. Next we have Moyamad, and I think they're going to be reciting a poem as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Moyamade. I am going to be reciting a poem titled A Plea for the Queer. So am I good to go? Okay. Mm. Sorry, I'm going to have to switch off my video for now. Here we go. Being queer in Africa is like being forced to swallow a pill. You hate pills. You really hate pills. And in fact, you are not sick, but there it is on your tongue. Society says, take this pill and be healed, or refuse to take it and be cast away. This is your society, your community, and yet your rainbow colors offend them. So you are stuck, constantly in between taking the pill and dying inside, or living out loud while you're stoned out of your community. Your father doesn't love you, they spat in your face. You're an abomination, a taboo. You're un-African, a thing of the West. But how do you tell them that your skin isn't un-African? That the blood which flows underneath your skin is a product of the many generations of Black people who till this soil? That your colored skin is a result of the God's work? That the gods of your mother and your mother's mother made no mistakes? You are not one of us, yet we live every day, breathing and eating in this culture we were inducted into. We belong here, we were born here, and here we live. Each day, hoping to have a better day than the last, yearning to finally stop hiding the colors that make us who we are, wishing to live, laugh, love without being endangered, desperately wanting to leave the closet at home without ever going back in it. We will never accept you. And so the journey begins, moving to lands far beyond the comfort of your home, realizing the world hates you in more ways than one. And when you celebrate, there are more fights left to be won, and you want to be home. You desperately crave to be home, to dance with your people and haggle with traders in the market. You want to be home, to be safe in your skin, to be protected in love. But home, the place you call home, has rejected you. We do not want your colors. We do not want your kind. And once again, you yearn desperately for a time when you can fly your flags with pride on the African soil your ancestors walked. Once again, you look forward to a future where you can be you without wearing a mask. You take the pill. It is bitter, very bitter. How can society force you to do this? You are dying every day, yet all they care about is that you take this pill and conform. You spit out the pill. The gods created you perfectly. They weren't slumbering while making you. You are worthy of love. You deserve to be celebrated. You deserve to be respected. You deserve to fly your flag, dear Black child. You deserve to show off your colors. It is your right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Moimade. That was so powerful. And yes, you definitely do deserve to be celebrated. Up next, we have Sharente.
Kuna shawang kuchi sumau ongkumnin nui amgi anau utki sukwat nui amgi anau utki sukwat Asqui kwasana masni tampoag natasubi Sharente Mashitash and Harris. Hello everyone, my name is Sharente and I am Niantic Narragansett. I live in Charlestown, Rhode Island, right off of the Narragansett Reservation. And the song I just shared with you is a sacred song to my people. And it is an honoring song, recognizing the spirits of those that have come before us. And the words mean, your spirit is washing over me. I know you are in the sky. I am a dual degree student at Brown University and Rhode Island School of Design right now. And I am two-spirit. So most of my artwork and my writing and the work that I've done is centered around being two-spirit. For those of you that don't know, Two-Spirit people are what we call LGBT people that are indigenous. And it is a word that helps to communicate the collective ideas of indigenous people regarding LGBT people. And I think that this is extremely relevant when we talk about feminism, when we talk about all of these movements that are going on in the world right now, and intersectionality. When I say that I am Two-Spirit, it means that I am both a man and a woman and somewhere in between. Much of my work is centered around decolonization. And in order to decolonize, I've heard it once said that you need to break your heart so that you can feel once again. And today in our increasingly colonized world, we too often think in binaries, in absolutes, and a much of indigenous worldview is centered around ideas of interconnectivity. And we think of a sacred circle, and that circle has no beginning and no end, and it is all Nashawi between. And so our Two-Spirit people are between people that exist somewhere in between, were traditionally honored within our communities. And unfortunately, today, there is a tremendous amount of homophobia and transphobia that we are facing. And I have been a person on the front lines in trying to create change through dance in our communities by going out and dancing in a style of dance that is of a female gender, even though I was born sexed male. And I have been met with horrific words from adults to young children that hear things from their parents. But amazingly, as time has progressed, change has been made. And Two-Spirit people are now again being recognized back into our circles, and our people are remembering to listen to the beating of their own hearts, something that we have been taught not to do long ago. And I think what's important when we think about feminism and gender, that in an indigenous worldview, sexuality and gender are not seen as being rigidly separate from each other the way that we think of them now, but rather all of those lines are blurred. And so you can meet Two-Spirit people that in the outside world, people would just think are gay men or gay women. Or you can meet Two-Spirit people that you might recognize as being trans or non-binary. And I think that's an important takeaway as we continue our conversations, is to think about that interconnectivity between us all. And with that in mind, I'd like to end with a short piece that I had written here in America, as it's been discussed, and around the world really. The Black Lives Matter movement has really ignited, and these words speak from my perspective as an Indigenous person that has lost my uncle, my grandfather, and my great uncle in hate crimes, and have not found justice within our current justice system in America today. Thinking about these murders and how they affect us and how they can unite us and how we can create change. We have been brought to a stillness, a slowness that holds to our deepest parts. Our bodies run, but the house of our hearts lies empty. Our mama is calling us back to her womb, calling our world to the stillness of beginnings, a call we've heard but seldom remember, for the part that remembers still waits in the dream time. Our father in the west pulled the air from our lungs and danced, gripping our breath in his fingers. For when he was murdered, a part of us died. We tore at the earth, holding in the names of our brothers and sisters, our mothers and fathers, our aunts and uncles, our sons and daughters, sitting in the terror of their crossing, bathing in the wells of the whites of their eyes. Our cries will bring the breath back, and the breath will turn to song, and the music will sit in the ears of those that refuse to listen, and change will come. The still places will rise and fall with the music's tides, and the hidden paths will show. And as the circle turns, by the light of the stars at morning, we will be born again. Katabatanamu, thank you everyone.
Thank you so much. I am in awe. Thank you for your art and your words. And I think you brought up something very important about how decolonization is something that we have to also take into consideration when we're talking about queer liberation and feminist movements. And thank you for that. I think we have a poll coming up now.
Yeah, our next poll is on, do you think feminist movements should organize along with LGBTQIA plus movements, or should they be independent? So basically go back to the discussion that we've had throughout the conversation, and please let us know what you think. You have 25 seconds more. Okay, we're ending it. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay, thank you. So right now we are going to be having an open discussion where people are allowed to ask questions to any of the panelists that we have today, and we're just going to be engaging in a very informal discussion.
If you don't feel comfortable speaking, you can give your questions in the chat box. Thank you.
We could also use this time to share any doodles or drawings that people may have made throughout the discussion today.
I did only get as far as one sentence, but I wrote, gender needs work. So far, it probably will need more work. That's as far as I got. It's true though.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you. Alrighty, so I guess that's it, unless if you want to like raise your hand or like type in the chat box if you'd like to share.
You guys were all super inspiring and well spoken, and I love the poetry and the singing. Thanks for joining.
Okay, so we have one question, and it reads, do you think that the definition of feminist has been distorted or appropriated and twisted into a narrative that is not intended? Do we need to reclaim this title or word and what it stands for? What do you guys think?
Personally, I do think the term feminism has been distorted in a negative way. For example, I'm going to be honest, a lot of white women in the movement, I'm not saying all, but a lot have been only focusing on their issues, how to dismantle the patriarchy, but in their own benefit. And I heard this analogy that it's not intersectional feminism when you're only caring for only white people. It's called white supremacy in heels. And I also think that is what has been happening a lot. And I noticed that a lot of my feminist friends who I thought were intersectional only really cared about their own needs about feminism. And I also think, aside from this, a lot of people think that feminists only care about women only and want to destroy men. That's not what we want to do. What we want to do is strive for equality for all, because clearly with the structure of our society and since its inception, men were the only people who were able to have full control and able to make major decisions. And what women were left to the side and expected to be either a housewife or just being a servant to their men. But women are capable of so many things. As we can see through many of our celebrity inventors, people, our motivational speakers, like we are right now. We are a credible woman that need to be acknowledged, and we should fight for equality and make sure that our wonderful woman, equal X inside of it, the word woman, should be heard.
I echo that so much, so much. There was someone who told me recently that they're not a feminist, and I'm like, what? And I realized like what people think feminism is. It's because of all of the negative connotation that comes with it, and what people have been thinking. Okay, it's only men hating, and it's so exclusionary. But I echo everything Chloe said, and I just wanted to offer that that support. Like, yes, that is exactly what it is. It has been distorted over time, and I think it's like, yes, we have to reclaim it, but also sort of tell folks or create spaces that actually encourages what feminism is at its core. So yeah.
I just wanted to add something as well, and I don't know if you can hear me. Can you guys hear me? Okay, cool. So for me, I feel like it's been twisted in a way, but again, I always try to give it in context in which the community that I live in, which is Zimbabwe, and the conversations that I've had with particularly women in regards to the context of feminism is because of the information that we have, or the information that we have right now as young people. It's primarily from abroad. So it's from Europe, it's from America, and etc. And their concerns around reclaiming that is, putting it in the context of Zimbabweans, or at least the African context of what feminism means or what it should look like. And that was just my contribution. I think it's really important to think when you have a movement, so to speak, it should also embody the context in which the communities are, the communities that it's supposed to help and the people it's supposed to help as well. So I guess it also looks at, it's cross-cutting. It looks at even stuff like Black Lives Matter. It looks at things like, queer folk as well, because there are queer folk all over the world. But again, it has to be contextual within the communities that you live in. So just to sum it up, reclamation for me would be trying to be inclusive of the separate communities that are involved within feminism, and I feel that's really important. Thank you very much.
I wanted to add that in what I have known in the Indian context is the way that feminism has been interpreted and the way feminism is presented to certain people, the idea that certain people have about feminism is also distorted because who makes more noise? Like there will be much more popular faces or famous faces who will define feminism based on the ideas, needs, or agendas specific to their social location, which is in most cases an upper class, upper caste, cis het sort of idea. And that gets more attention than when you have feminists actually screaming for intersectionality, inclusion, and everything. And I think that is taken to a greater extent because from the opposition also there's this idea to continuously find ways that you can actually question, malign, and kind of absolutely invalidate the movement altogether. So I think that is I have felt is one of the reasons how feminism has been distorted and presented to a large number of people. And that's why they say that, you know, I do not recognize myself as a feminist. I do not want to be a part of this movement altogether. And I've seen in a trend of like people calling themselves equalists, humanists, things like that, just to like not be associated with the feminist movement.
Thank you, everybody, for your responses. It is 10:30, well, my time, because I'm in Chicago. And so we'll be closing now, but feel free to hang around if you want to ask any questions or you want to just talk a bit more. And we also have a poll that should be popping up on your screen right now. Just asking you, just like, you know, just to check in, like, how are you feeling right now?
Thank you all so much for sharing. You were so amazing.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that people seem to be happy bees. 58% of you said you're feeling sparkles, so I suppose that makes us all very happy.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Sharente.
Thank you.
Thank you for making the space so positive, so inclusive, and learned a lot. And it was great being a part of this.
Thank you to the amazing MCs, Yola and Tanisha. Snaps to you guys.
Thank you to everyone who participated as well. I would really love to have most of you, all you guys social, all you guys social, so I can have these conversations with you, you know, continuously and just learn from everyone here.
Thank you, Sophie, for asking me to come here, and I'm gonna leave. And I'm